Hey everyone, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Ray Fittipaldo. It is draft day. We switched it up. Instead of doing Wednesday, we did Thursday for the morning of the draft to make sure you have all the insights you need for the Steelers as they head into the first round of the draft tonight. Draft kicks off 8 p.m. We have a live stream show, but we're going to get you set up for all of that here. Quarterbacks, D-tackle, what did Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin say on Tuesday? Everything else, is a trade possible? We cover all the angles right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're your Steelers writers. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite apps on YouTube. Like you enjoy it, subscribe. Get all Monday, Wednesday. To you about I want to talk about this for this first round. There's a lot to go over, but first, of course, we got to remind ourselves this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or you need help with workers' compensation, you got to call Edgar Snyder Associates today, 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about this first round here. And I want to, before we dive into it fully, I think the biggest question that has been propped up by national people and now by some more local people, because it was a big topic on Tuesday when we spoke with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan at the facility. But the question about the quarterback position, Aaron Rodgers still isn't signed, so there's a lot of thought that the Steelers could be desperate at the quarterback position. Shedeur Sanders, of course, being the one that's being linked to them. Cam Ward is the top quarterback on everyone's boards. He's going to be gone first overall, and the Steelers don't have a chance of getting him. But then Shedeur Sanders, different situation. There's questions if he'll go top 10. Some people thought he'd go top 3, but now there's questions he might fall to 21. And if he does, would the Steelers pass on him there? Mike Tomlin spoke glowingly about him, saying there's a toughness there that doesn't get talked about enough. The intangible qualities displayed on tape were very impressive to me, talking about Shedeur Sanders. And you don't often hear Mike Tomlin glow specifically about a prospect like that. But Ray, is this just a smokescreen from Mike Tomlin, or do you think the Steelers really are that far in on going after Shedeur Sanders in this first round?
Yeah, well, we might find out Thursday night because, like you said, Chris, that Shedeur Sanders seems to have fallen out of the top 5 or top 10. And after you fall out of the top 10 and the New Orleans Saints don't take you, there is a path for him to get to the Steelers. So I think they like Shedeur Sanders. I don't think they would have wasted their time and brought him in for a visit if they didn't like him. The question is how much? What kind of grade do they have on him? Does he have a first-round grade? If he does, is it better than any of the defensive linemen that they want to target here, or a running back like Omarion Hampton, who also, I think, is in that conversation? So for me, Chris, as I look at it, I think quarterback is in play, yes, but I think it has to be the right fit, and the Steelers have to know that they're going to get their guy there.
I think that's the thing here is it all depends on how the Steelers evaluate Shedeur Sanders, because like myself, I've made it very public. I don't think drafting Shedeur Sanders in the first round would be a great fit for the Steelers. I don't think that he's necessarily as NFL ready. I think he's a floor raiser, not a ceiling raiser. I think that he would not be a big time game changer for the Steelers at the quarterback position. And I could be wrong, but in my evaluations and so I have him as a second round pick in this draft class. And I think that if the Steelers had a second round pick, then I'd be more inclined to think about it if he fell there. But in the first round, I feel like that overdrafting him would be a mistake, would be one there. But again, it's all about what the Steelers see, because you know what? There's plenty of times that, people take a quarterback, like the Ravens took Lamar Jackson at 32 overall, and every team passed on him to get to 32 overall, and then it turned out he was an MVP quarterback for them, and he's a big reason why they're a Super Bowl competitor for the past several years. So, it's all about what do you see? What do the Steelers see there? And I think that's the big question here. Will the Steelers go after to get that quarterback when they do need a quarterback on their roster? Whether or not they feel comfortable with Mason Rudolph, whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to sign there, they still would need a third quarterback to sign there to be with Skylar Thompson and Mason Rudolph. So I think it's very much on the board. I don't think it's out of the complete realm of possibility. I just still think that it's not as likely as some people out there have made it seem.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And let's remind people that they've scouted quarterbacks pretty much in every round this year. I know a lot of people think third or fourth round might be the range if they go after one of those second or third tier quarterbacks. So, that's also something that we have to keep an eye on. They went to a lot of pro days in addition to bringing in guys like Sanders and Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss. So they're going to have their eyes on several quarterbacks at several different levels of the draft. And I think there's a strong likelihood that they will come up with a quarterback. But, Chris, you know how it works. If the draft unfolds in a certain way and their quarterback targets are gone, they're not going to reach for a quarterback that they don't believe in. They're going to have to pick somebody that they believe in. So the draft is a funny thing. I think, like I said, I think there's a decent possibility that they are going to draft one, but we'll have to wait and see how it plays out Thursday, Friday, and then the Saturday as well.
As Omar Khan described, the way they set up their big board on Thursday night for the first round of the draft is they have their top players ranked up to the position that they pick. So this year they have their top 21 players in the draft, and that's not and it's 21 players for the Steelers specifically, not just the 21 players overall. And that also includes your Cam Wards, your Travis Hunters, your Abdul Carters, your top players, across the board. And so I guess the big question is, would Shedeur Sanders be in that top 21 picks there? And that's something that they didn't officially confirm, because they're not going to show that. The Steelers, their job is to not show their cards, because if people have a good sense of where they're going, they can plan around it. They can trade up around them. They can, it makes it tough. And then also it makes trading tough, because then people know what you want. And then they're going to be like, okay, well, we're going to highball you. We're going to they're going to do whatever they can to take advantage of you. And as Omar Khan also alluded to during his press conference on Tuesday, he talked about how, all the GMs talk, but he's like, but of course they're all trying to game each other. They're not trying to, they're friendly, but they're also trying to exploit each other, because that's the whole point of this, is you're trying to do the best for your team. And the best way to do that is to get other teams to give you stuff that they normally shouldn't have wanted to give you. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers play this up and going into this, because it just reminds me of Malik Willis back in the 2022 NFL draft, when there was all sorts of hype around Mike Tomlin loving Malik Willis, and he was just the guy. Now, granted, they still picked a quarterback; it just was Kenny Pickett that year in the first round, but it seemed like that was one of those Mike Tomlin smoke screens that Jerry noted there, and it just makes me wonder, what is the smoke screen? Because I'll give the Steelers credit to this. They have several up that could make you think, well, wait a minute. What if they're not really going this way or that way? It makes it harder to predict them this year than maybe some of their past years.
Yeah, you always want to keep your opponents guessing as to what you're going to do in the draft. So that's gamesmanship that every coach and every GM, they're all playing that card right now. For the Steelers, and talking about Malik Willis, and this is probably the case with a lot of players in this draft, you can genuinely I'll just use Shedeur Sanders as an example because we're talking about him. You can genuinely like Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, but you just might not have a first round grade on him, or you might not have a grade as high on him as, say, Omarion Hampton, who also could be a target in the first round. So, even if they get to the point Shedeur Sanders is available at 21 and they pick somebody else, people are going to say it's a smoke screen, and maybe it was, but sometimes you just got to have conviction and pick the best player available on your board at a certain position. And I think, Chris, we could all agree, and I know we're going to talk about all positions in the second and third segments, but I think we could all agree pretty much right now, first pick, probably going to be a quarterback, a running back, or a defensive lineman. Maybe a wild card in there, like a Shamar Stewart or a Nick Emanwari, that kind of those random visits that we're all kind of trying to evaluate. What does it mean? What does it not mean? But if I was a betting man and you said quarterback, running back, D-line, if it's going to be one of those three, I'd say that's like a 90 to 95% chance of happening. I think it's going to be one of those three positions.
I agree. Let's talk about those other two positions. We talked about quarterback here. Real quick. I'm like slightly entertaining Shedeur Sanders. There's nothing about what I will entertain about Jaxson Dart or Jalen Milroe or anyone else being the 21st overall pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers if it's a quarterback other than Shedeur Sanders. Are you in agreement there, or do you think that like they might be open to other options?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jerry Dulac did report that the Steelers have a first-round grade on Jaxson Dart, so I think maybe you keep that door slightly open. But yeah, like the Milroe talk, he's invited to the draft. He's accepted an invite, so there is some buzz about him being a first-round pick. But I don't think that would be with the Steelers at 21. I think it's much more likely that he's a day 2 pick, a second-round pick, or somebody goes up at 31 or 32, trades in there and like takes a flyer on him. So you get the 5th-year option if he doesn't work out. Much in the same way the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson.
There you go. We're going to talk about the other positions now because I know a lot of people are like, we don't want quarterback. I hear you, Steelers fans. Don't worry. We're getting to the other guys. But we had to cover that in the first segment, but we'll do that next. But first, to remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Did you know they also help you with workers' compensation? When you've been hard on the job, do you know who decides when you're going to be better? Do you know who decides when your treatment is over? And you know who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, you need to get some help on your side. The great place to call for help is Edgar Snyder Associates. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about the other options in the first round here that the Steelers are going to be looking at tonight. You and I have been banging the table for D tackle. We have done so many mocks where it's just D tackle, all the D tackles. Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolen, Derrick Harmon. I think Derrick Harmon's become more of the favorite of late just because of his Cam Hayward build. The Steelers have brought him in for a pre-draft visit. They didn't bring in Nolen or Grant, so there's something there. But also running back. You brought that position up. Omarion, Hampton, TreVeyon, Henderson. They're the running backs that are expected to potentially be there at 21 that could be worth the 21st overall pick. If we were to narrow it down to just those 5 players, Nolen, Grant, Harmon, Hampton, Henderson, do you feel like that is the general feel? Like we said, like we're like 95% sure it's those 3 positions. Do you feel like we're similar to those of the 5 players that most likely get their name called by the Steelers tonight in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. We know for just based on their combine interviews and pro day visits and top 30 visits that all of those guys are guys who were brought in for that, or the Steelers traveled there to get to know those guys better. And I guess if you want to call one of those guys a late riser, I guess it would be Henderson, right? Like I think throughout most of this process, he was projected to be a 2nd-round pick. Sometimes, in some cases, a high 2nd-round pick. But like in a lot of the national mock drafts, you really didn't see him in the 1st round. Now, that doesn't mean anything. The Steelers or other teams can have conviction on a guy. And it could easily happen that he could jump up and be the number 21 pick in the draft. That guy is super talented. I think sometimes when you're in a committee situation in college, sometimes people look at the numbers. They won't be wowed by it. Like, why are you sharing time with Quinshaw Judkins? But Henderson has been called the best pass protector among the running backs in this draft. Excellent receiver out of the backfield. And even though he's a smaller back, he's a guy who's also viewed as a guy who can carry a heavy workload and be RB1 for you, in the right situation. So there's a lot of people who really like TreVeyon Henderson. But to your larger point, yes, Henderson, Hampton, or any of those 3 D-line targets. I think that's a good group to pick from if you're a fan and trying to project what's going to happen tonight at 9:30, 10 o'clock once the NFL gets around to calling the Steelers.
No, yeah, I agree with you there. So I also think it might be kind of to Henderson's benefit that he was in a running back by committee, because you look at like Cam Scatabo, awesome player in college, but a lot of people are just worried that he's too worn down for the pros. Like, he won't last long in the NFL with the way that he plays and how much tread is on his tires. I think that's part of it there. But Ray, let's step away from the running back position. We have been banging the table for D tackle. If you had your choice, all three of those guys are available, who would you pick between those defensive tackles, and what would be the factor that would lead you to pick it?
Well, you, Brian Bacco, and myself, we all picked Derrick Harmon in our final mock draft. So I'm going to stick with Derrick Harmon, even though my mock draft ran over the weekend. He's just the guy who would be a tremendous guy to develop behind Cam Hayward. And I'm not saying he wouldn't play as a rookie. You would certainly work him in there as a rookie. He would get great experience. But with Cam Hayward turning 36 years old, this guy is your prototypical 5 technique, tremendous athlete. I've said this before, Chris. I think he relies too much on his athleticism. I think he has to learn how to embrace his size and strength a little bit more and play a little bit more in the style of a Cam Hayward. And I think, again, you get him in the Steelers system, and Cam Hayward can teach him how the Steelers want him to play. That would be great. But, again, Kenneth Grant wouldn't be a bad pick. Plug him in there in the middle of your defense. He's got some versatility to play in sub packages. And, Walter Nolen, even though he plays 3 technique, and he's a different style defensive lineman than the Steelers have typically had at that position, right? He's more of a penetrating guy. He likes to wreak havoc in the backfield. He would rather go around you than through you. That's something that's a little bit out of the ordinary for the Steelers, who typically like their linemen to take on blocks in the running game and that sort of thing. But he's such a tremendous athlete. If you drafted a guy like him, Chris, I think you let him be him. Let him be him, and just let him do his thing. And if you have to make some adjustments with your defense and how your linebackers play behind him, I think you readily make those adjustments. I think there's a reason he's probably the D lineman with the highest ceiling in this draft. But again, we talked about fits with the quarterbacks. It's got to be the right fit for your defense as well. And I think if the Steelers drafted Nolen, they would have to have a plan for him.
I agree. But I think it's interesting. I asked Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan on Tuesday about, do they draft specifically, D tackle or positions based off of who they have in those early rounds. And Omar Khan says, I just drafted. Our plan is to get the best guy, like no matter what it is. If he's a 5 tech, 1 tech, 3 tech, whatever it is, I'm getting the best guy. And Mike Tomlin brought up a very good point. Him saying, hey, when we're looking at guys in the first round, we're looking at guys for pedigree. It's less about fit and roles and schemes. That's what you get when you get to the later rounds, because then those guys are scheme dependent. That's why those guys are in those rounds. But in the first round, it's about pedigree. And so I think that was kind of a nod to, like, they won't just go for a guy just because he's a 5 tech or a 3 tech or a nose. And Mike Tomlin also said just after that question that he feels like the nose is a disappearing animal in the NFL. So the question will be, who do they feel is the best overall player? Now, I did pick Derrick Harmon in my mock draft, but in my mock, that was because Kenneth Grant was off the board. In my big board, I have Kenneth Grant as my top defensive tackle that would be available to the Steelers, presuming Mason Graham went. I also think there's a chance that Kenneth Grant could be a better player than Mason Graham. I think that, and the specific reason for that is when you look at the tape between them, there are a lot of plays that Mason Graham is set up by Kenneth Grant's ability to take on double teams, to be the physical force, and to get to create the one-on-ones for him. And I'm not saying for sure, because there's a good reason why Mason Graham is a consensus top 10 pick, but I really like Kenneth Grant as a prospect. He would be my top option there if all 3 of them fell to the first round. But again, I think if they got any one of those 3, it would be a major win for this defensive line, for this defense, for this organization, because I think that either one of them can be a foundational piece for the long term as far as what the Steelers want to be. And like you said, replenishing what you're losing in Cam Hayward, even if he's not necessarily just a 5 technique guy, but they need an interior force that's going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, and I think the reason, the Steelers might go away from D-line in the first round if they don't have a grade on a guy, there wouldn't be any panic, Chris, because this is a deep defensive line draft. Even though they don't have a second-round pick, they believe they can still get a guy third or fourth round who could come in and help this football team. But for me, Chris, just knowing the way this defense is built, knowing the struggles they've had recently, I think D-line is their top priority. And like I said, I would be surprised if it's not one of those three at pick number 21 tonight.
Absolutely. Let's go over what else could happen. The trade back scenarios. That's something that the Steelers always have to be aware of. We'll go over those possibilities next year on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this episode is also brought to you by UFC Gym. April is Stress Awareness Month, and studies show that doing even one group exercise class a week can significantly reduce stress. So there's no better time to move your body and reset your mind at UFC Gym. However you blow off steam, they've got it. They've got boxing, kickboxing, Zumba, MMA, HIIT, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, muscle makeover, spin, yoga, cardio core, bar, youth classes, and silver sneakers, all ready to help you feel stronger inside and out. Drop in this week at UFC Gym in Market Square or the Waterfront to try a class for free. That's UFC Gym Pittsburgh. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, we've gone over. I think we both feel Derrick Harmon is a likely pick here. D tackle is there. We've gone over the quarterback possibilities, but let's go over the other possibility for tonight, and that's that the Steelers could be in a trade scenario. Now, the Steelers did trade their first-round pick just 2 years ago. They traded up to get Broderick Jones. They were aggressive in doing so. They felt he was their guy. They got ahead of the Jets because they were worried that he might take them, and they were able to do that. They made several trades that day. That draft weekend, excuse me. They traded to get Darnell Washington later. In the draft class, they were able to still get Nick Herbig, and they made moves. Then last year they weren't big traders in the trade market. So this year the question is, will they be players in the trade market again? You had 1 year, you've had two drafts with Omar Khan. 1 year's draft was trade heavy. 1 year trade non-existent, and so. Now the question is, will they play there? I think everyone has been kind of looking at the possibility of them trading back because of the loss of the second-round pick that they sent away for the DK Metcalf trade. If we've been assigning percentages, Ray, what is the percentage of likelihood that the Steelers do trade back in this draft class?
I would say it's close to zero for trading up because of what you just mentioned. But, trading back, I think it's a possibility. But I don't think you want to trade back say more than 5 or 6 spots, right? Because I think the Steelers are going to have their targets in mind around 21. And if there's a chance that, they could recoup a second-round pick and they could still get one of their guys, let's say, 26, 27, 28, in that range, I think that's a possibility. Trading back any deeper, not knowing which prospects are going to be there, I think that's unlikely. And I think even, Chris, even if you don't get a second-round pick, let's say you just go back 4 spots, you get a third-round pick. Mm-hmm. This draft is so deep into the third and fourth round, you're going to be able to get quality players there as well as the second round. So I don't think, people are focusing on, they don't have a second-round pick, they got to get a second-round pick. They could just end up getting a third-round pick. And I think the Steelers and Omar Khan and Andy Weidel and Mike Tomlin, they would be happy about that.
I'm right with you there. I think that would be, again, it's getting day 2, because to me, when I've looked at my top 100 big board, which is available on post-gazette.com, I've also updated it with some newer rankings. When I look at my top 100 big board, there are a lot of really good players that I think are potential starters and stars in the NFL that fall in that 50 to 80 range. And the thing is, with the 50 to 80 range, that's second round to early third round. So early to mid third round, because the Steelers pick 83. I think if they were able to get a third round pick that's before theirs, that would be ideal for what they're trying to do. And then there's teams that want to do that. Now it's a little bit back further than 5 spots, but you look at the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the Titans third round pick, which is an early third round pick. And if you were to go back 9 spots, that's a lot of spots to go back. But actually, it's 10 spots, but that's a lot supposed to go back. But if you felt that, hey, if all those D tackles were there at 21 and you were confident that, hey, one of those guys is going to fall 10 spots, they're not all going to get taken in the next 10 picks, it's a gamble. But then if you were to do that and recoup that early third round pick that they have, then you do have some serious day 2 ammunition to go get running back, to go get a quarterback, to go get a wide receiver, a corner, whatever you feel is necessary in those spots. I think that gives you that day two ammunition that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I would still be a little bit, trigger shy about going back 10 spots. But you're right. I agree with you about the depth of this draft. And I think specifically we touched on it a little bit with the D linemen, but it's the same situation, Chris, with the running backs. It's a very deep running backs class, and you are going to be able to get either starter quality backs or very good rotational backs in that range. In my final mock draft, I hadn't taken Bashal Tutin out of Virginia Tech, but I could probably rattle off 5 or 6 other names who would be available in that 3rd or 4th round range that either they brought in for visits or that they're interested in. So they will have their options if they are able to trade back. I think they would like to do it, but again, it's got to be the right scenario where they know they're going to be able to still grab somebody they want in that 1st round.
I think that's the thing here. It's making it the right scenario is always the thing here. Is they got to have the right fit. Also, I thought it was interesting. Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin talking about guys they wouldn't trade back for or trade back out of. Excuse me. But if we talked about that top 21 board that they assemble every to make sure hey, these are the players. There's players that are on that board that they're saying hey, if that guy falls, we're not picking up any phone calls. That's who we want. And it makes me wonder, who are those players? What type of players would be in that spot there? They could say, hey, they would be willing to say, hey, you know what? I know that someone might be calling with that high 3rd round pick, but this player is too good to pass up. And again, you're looking for foundational pieces in the 1st round. You're looking for franchise game changers. And if you think you got one there and you're not sure if he'll be there from when you trade back, you take that player and you run with it, because that is the win that you're looking for here. Yeah.
And, you mentioned this before, but it's the top. When the Steelers do their board, they're trying to put together the top 21 Steelers choices. Now, there might be higher graded players on their list, but let's say there's a medical red flag there. Steelers say, we can't take this guy. Maybe there's a character red flag. Guy's taken off the board. They said, we're just not going to draft this guy because of character issues. Those are things that when we do our mock drafts, we're not necessarily privy to that information. Now, sometimes word leaks out. I haven't seen it much this year, but, you will always see a guy who has major character flaws, and, a lot of teams have him off their board. I haven't heard a lot about that this year, but there will be guys who fall in the draft, and some guys will fall completely off boards for either medical or character issues. And that's the case every year, and that's the case likely with the Steelers every year as well.
Agreed. It's good. There's a lot of movement that happens, and there's a lot of lies that happen. There's a lot of things that are told to us in the media that's told to other teams. Every team is trying to fool you. Every team is trying to put it out there. Oh yeah, we're thinking this, so that they can come in on draft night and make the big move that solidifies their roster, and that people don't see it, so they can't get in the way. We'll be having all the coverage that you need right here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, thanks for joining me here on the North Shore Drive podcast. A reminder of all the things that you can get tonight on draft night. We will be having a live stream show where myself, Jason Mackey, Adam Bittner will be at Mike's Beer Bar. Come say hello to us. We'll be getting things going around 8 p.m. when the draft does start. You can also look to read our work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Ray Fittipaldo joining me here, Brian Backo, Jerry Dulac. They'll be on site at the facility getting you the reactions all throughout the night. We'll also be chiming in Brian on the live stream show, and we will have a show for Friday, just recapping what happened here. All that coverage you can find at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where you'll be getting all our insights as what the Steelers will do on the first night of the draft, and all throughout the draft. We'll have another live stream for Friday as well for the second day of the draft. So keep it here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and all your Steelers and NFL draft coverage. We'll see you tonight on the live stream. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.